Alright, YouTube, today we have the retarded tale of Edward Price, a former, now, CIA analyst who said, "Oh, I quit the CIA, I can't serve the Trump administration because he says bad things about the CIA and about other intelligence agencies. And he says that we might be compromised and so forth." Well, why don't you Google Operation Northwoods first and foremost? You know, the fact that it was real is kind of chilling. It shows you what certain intelligence agencies and maybe quasi-military branches are actually capable of if they think that something needs to be done. Then, why don't we look at the long history of the CIA and its own scandals, like the presence of the CIA annex in Benghazi or something like that, that people stop talking about. It was great to watch. Trump gets elected. Immediately people stop arguing for accountability over those events. You know, Libya's been completely destabilized. It's now completely overrun by ISIS. And yet nobody's talking about Benghazi anymore. In fact, prediction comes true here, that people are no longer really talking about Hillary. They're no longer chanting "lock her up." Now, I think it'd be a good thing to do that. I think it'd be great to hold the Clinton dynasty accountable for its criminal actions that it almost certainly was engaged in Libya, in Haiti, and elsewhere. We saw the involvement of, it seems, Huma's inner circle, Anthony Weiner and so forth, in Haiti, in coordination with the Clinton Foundation's supposedly charitable work there. The former president of the Senate of Haiti coming out saying, they weren't here for charity, they were selling drugs, putting them in cereal boxes and then shipping them by jetliners to Florida and so forth. I can believe it. I'm going to tend to believe that report because it's the sort of thing that you would associate with the Clinton Foundation. Their charitable work is not charitable. Where do you think they get all that charity money from? They're getting it from groups like the Saudis and so forth. Yeah, I think they should be held accountable. The intelligence agencies of the United States have largely failed us. They were the ones who said, Saddam has WMDs. And it came from reporting from them. You almost can't even blame Bush. He had to be stupid to believe the reports. But he was being fed intel by groups like the CIA and so forth that were telling him things that blatantly were not true. It seems that we've got to assume. People often think of the CIA, the FBI and stuff. They think that that's law enforcement side of bureaucracy. So it's different from the EPA or the Department of Education, all these others. It's almost like they become sacred cows in a bipartisan sense. But they're still bureaucrats. They are bureaucratic groups. They're extra-governmental agencies under the general watch of the legislative or executive branch of our government. That means that they get funded too much, potentially. We've seen money has gone missing at the Pentagon so many times by now. It's like, what are they building? Are they building a spaceship? Or it's impossible to actually tell because they make sure to cover their asses as well as they can. We find out intelligence talking about the Gulf of Tonkin incident so many years ago. That was fudged. Intelligence on Saddam was fudged. What happened at Benghazi was completely suspicious, I think, in time. Eventually, declassified reports will come out when I'm old and gray, when we're all like in our 50s and a lot of us are fucking dead. Then they'll pull a Gulf of Tonkin on us or a 9/11 report on us 20, 30 years from now. They'll say, oh yeah, by the way, it wasn't some spontaneous uprising. It had nothing to do with the YouTube video. Yeah, they completely lied, and we let these people die because we wanted, like, involvement in the region, and we were smuggling guns to the FSA along with other goods, and we just didn't want to be found out about it because we thought it was appropriate at the time. That's what'll happen. It's good to finally have a president who has the balls to stand up to groups like the CIA. Now, the only intelligence agency I can see that appears to be functioning in a proper capacity is the FBI. The FBI appears to be trying to do its job, and it appears to be encountering stiff resistance in doing so by other intelligence agencies as well as the government at large. That's my reading of the situation. I think that James Comey did want to go after Clinton, but was convinced to do otherwise based on the fact that if he had gone after a presidential candidate, from one of the major parties, it would have caused electoral chaos and madness. I think that's the reason that he held back, and you could tell on 2 different occasions he seems to really have wanted to go after her because he knew that there was wrongdoing. And in fact, his own statement, the first statement that he made on the case with regards to Clinton's servers, essentially, it doesn't exonerate her, it incriminates her and simply says the FBI is unwilling to bother bringing charges because more reasons. Oh, there was no, she wasn't trying to commit any crime because she's just fucking ignorant. Well, ignorance is no excuse, but apparently if you're Hillary Clinton, that works. Maybe it helps that they're probably aware that she's kind of demented. No, we can't drag a demented person through the court system. You know, she could stroke out. She probably won't get found guilty. They'll just say that she's insane and they'll lock her up in a nut ward for the next half decade or something. It's probably what would have happened. But the CIA is best known for, running crack cocaine into the inner cities to try to clean up all the cokeheads and stuff like that. It's like they have these weird ways of operating. The general perception of the CIA is sort of X-Files, one part X-Files and one part general worldwide conspiracy to commit espionage and run drugs, often in tandem with one another. That's what the CIA is generally known for. A lot of people don't even understand exactly what I don't think the Central Intelligence Agency has that great of intelligence. I think you're looking at the FBI if you want the competent agents involved that actually earn their keep and have a reason to have such a large budget. I wouldn't put the CIA on that list. It's the same as any other bureaucratic agency. Some operate better than others. Some of them are downright useless. The NSA is completely useless. Their intelligence hasn't stopped a single attack. We're still funding them. One thing I wish Trump would do is cut them back out. There's no need for their very existence. The DHS, what's the point of it? We never had a DHS until shortly after 9/11. And we were generally doing just fine without them. And that's the other part that some people, when they look at them, they look at intelligence agencies, intelligence analysts, blah, blah, this bureaucrat and that bureaucrat, which is what these people are. They act as though the functions of our nation are reliant upon the existence and continuation of these groups. And that's simply not the case. A great many of these bureaus are fairly modern constructions. And before that, the role that they served was a private role, something that the government didn't involve itself in, or it was handled at a state or local level. In many cases with these investigations, you go back far enough, you're talking about police, or the Lone Ranger or something. You're not talking about some bureaucratic agency. The expansion of infrastructure, the Department of Transportation sort of side of things. Originally, all infrastructure heralded under the government was basically being constructed by private firms that had simply been given license to do so by the federal government. We think about the expansion of the railroads out west, the Homestead Act sort of era thing. So no, they're not necessary to the function of our republic. In fact, they're anything but. They're strangulating and expensive. People wonder why their taxes are so high. Here are the Republicans rambling about high taxes. Oh, we need to cut taxes. We need to cut spending. Why don't you start by cutting groups like this that appear not to be doing their job? You don't have to get rid of them entirely. You simply have to constrain them more. And once they're constrained, then I will disagree with one thing that Trump appears to be doing. That's like using Rex Tillerson and these others to slash and burn parts of their own agencies, like the State Department or whatever. That's not the right way to do it. What you do is decline their functions first and foremost, remove their mandate to beg for more money and more manpower, and then you cut it. Because you're going to need some of those people from within the organizations, potentially who agree with you in the summation that things are inefficient and bloated and fucked up. You need them to help you actually do that cutting. But if you cut them first and then try to scale back the role of the agency, it won't work quite so well. What Congress will do to grandstand, all the neocons and neolibs, what they're going to do, they say, oh, Trump cut X number of positions in this agency. Now the agency is coming before our committees here and telling us they don't have enough staff, they don't have enough money. And they'll try to use the legislature, like they always do, to justify even more spending. You'll end up spending the same amount or more on less people and less functions if you continue down this road. No, first you decline the function. Make it clear that there are plenty of things that these bureaus do that aren't necessary for them to be doing. They should be privatized, given back to the states, or the government shouldn't regard them in the first place. Like mass surveillance. It's not necessary, it doesn't help anyone, it's very expensive. Once that's accomplished, then you decline the agency's manpower and budget. And you take that money, preferably you're taking, I would suggest, for every savings that you're making, you take half of that total and put it through to tax cuts of some form or another. It hardly matters what version they take. And the other half towards spending on our massive debt total in hopes of slowing down the deficit further and eventually negating it altogether so that for the next 100 years or so we can start paying off our debt. Because that's how long it'll take. Even under the best of circumstances, 100 years from now we'd still be in debt. That's how massive it's become. Thank you, Bush. Thank you, Obama. These two presidents combined basically sold our livelihood. Now we need basically austerity light in order to continue functioning. That comes attenuated with its own problems of reduction of the stimulation of the economy that the government actually is capable of building in a growing economy altogether. A little bit of interventionism can serve you well. It can stimulate things, get them growing faster. Unfortunately, we've got way too much interventionism on ineffective stimulus, a strangulating bureaucracy that hoards most of that additional spending to itself anyway, and it doesn't trickle down to the private economy. When the left rambles about how bad trickle-down is, oh, you mean tax cuts on people who make businesses? Oh, that won't help the poor because it couldn't possibly generate jobs if combined with overhauling these retarded trade deals. The real trickle-down is the left thinking that you can give the government more money to spend on supposedly private endeavors and that it actually trickles down to stimulating your economy with growth. It never works. Never has worked, never will work. We've already developed infrastructure, we can't even maintain it. So how is building more of it going to help us? We'll begin to look like China. China's making that mistake 10 times over. China centrally plans and using interventionism. It builds infrastructure, it builds roads, it builds apartments, it builds parks, it builds everything else, rail lines and subways. And then growth doesn't keep up. The private marketplace doesn't actually boom into that area they've invested into. And they lose a huge amount of money and then stuff begins to decay. They can't even pay to maintain it. That's a little bit like how we're now operating. And we need to scale that back or we're going to fuck our own economy 10 times harder than we currently are just with debt alone. And just with interventionism light. These bureaucrats are expendable, every single one of them. None of these agencies that was constructed in the last 100 years is truly necessary to the functions of our country. I think sometimes people forget that. We existed for most of our history without most of these agencies. DHS, new. NSA, fairly new. CIA, fairly new. In terms of the United States history. We don't need them. For some analyst to say, oh, I'm quitting because I won't work for Trump. Who cares? Stop whining and go get a private industry job. Go work as be a security guard or something like that. You're potentially qualified for that. And then you'll have to actually pay taxes. You won't be sucking the taxpayer teat anymore. You'll know what it's actually like to work, in the private marketplace, as opposed to having a cushy government job with your overpriced goods, with all of your weird spy gadgets that you have in your fucking bathroom, making sure to monitor all the shits that you take for ETs or something like that. I don't have a high opinion of the CIA. I don't have a high opinion of the NSA. I have a somewhat high opinion of the FBI because they appear to do their job. I think of all of the intelligence agencies, they're the only competent ones that we've got. And when they're engaged in trying to stop terrorists or something, they go whole hog and just start butchering everyone. It's a little bit like the Stasi or something like that. The CIA, they march in, they don't even know what to do, it seems. They couldn't do anything from their annex there in Benghazi. They can't do anything to save our nation. All they do is watch X-Files all day to get ideas on their press releases and so forth. So I'm not going to sit there and act like, oh, Edward Price, oh, he's standing up against this horrible, evil, orange Dorito dictator, Donald Trump. No, he's just doing what bureaucrats tend to do. They whine when they don't get their way. And they're going to go before Congress at some point, and they're going to whine to them and say, oh, Trump took some of our money. We don't have enough manpower for all the regulations we have to enforce. And what Trump should do is go before the legislature himself, say, well, why don't you just cut the number of regulations further? That's kind of the point. Yeah, let's make the government cost less. Pass that savings on to ensuring that we don't completely drown in debt. We can shut that off, shut off the spigot of debt spending, number one. Number two, we can probably lower taxes a bit, stimulate the economy, then revenue increases to that same level, we'll be doing fine. And our economy will actually grow for a change. You know, like it hasn't in years and years. It's been a decade since we've had actual decent growth. Bush oversaw. He gets in, the dot-com bubble shit happens, and things get fucked up. Then for a few years we linger along. Then Iraq begins. We start debt spending, and by the end of his tenure, the housing bubble explodes. The banks start to get fucked. Automotive gets fucked. Everyone's getting screwed. What's Obama's solution? Oh, I'll take like 700 billion taxpayer dollars and give it to these banks and manufacturers. I'm going to give money from private citizens to supposedly private business firms, in many cases with not nearly enough strings attached, because somehow that's fair and moral and also constitutional. Now, I happen to disagree with that as well. I think it was a bad idea. I don't think it was necessary. I think we got sold a pig in a poke, so to speak. Hopefully Trump takes us on a different route, and if the economy does fall back into recession while he's president, which is entirely possible, let's admit, hopefully he has different ideas about how the situation can be solved. Hopefully it involves further deregulation. It's what we need to do. Let the private marketplace finally fix itself. It's been waiting to do so for quite some time. The government keeps tamping it down when it tries to correct itself. It would be messy and painful for many people, mostly bankers, honestly. And and that misery would trickle down to the general population. How would that be different from the last recession? From the Great Recession that was really a depression light, and people just pretended that it wasn't because they didn't want to face the hard facts of reality. And all of these bureaus, what does the CIA add to our economy other than cocaine, I suppose? So, I guess screw the agent. It doesn't really matter if he quits because he wants to sit there and pretend he's holier than thou about evil Trump or something like that. It's not why you're leaving the agency. You're just afraid that they're going to cut your job because it's not necessary. That's about all. Peace out.